Daniel Foster knelt in the frozen mud of Cedar Bend Cemetery, his calloused hands pressing against the wooden cross he'd carved 3 winters ago. Snow fell on his bare head, but he didn't move. Didn't feel it. His lips moved in the same words he'd spoken every Sunday since Margaret died, begging for help that never came. "I'll never turn away a widow," he whispered. "Not while I draw breath." He didn't know that tomorrow a woman with 7 hungry children and a broken wagon would test that vow and crack open the tomb he'd built around his heart. If you want to see how one widow's courage changed this broken man forever, subscribe to our channel and stay until the end. Drop a comment telling us which city you're watching from. We love seeing how far our stories travel. The hammer came down hard. Daniel Foster struck the glowing iron with the precision of a man who'd found his only peace in work. Sparks flew into the darkness of his workshop. The lamp flame flickered. Outside, Cedar Bend slept under a blanket of October frost, but Daniel had been awake for hours. He always was. Sleep meant dreams. Dreams meant Margaret. And Margaret meant remembering how she'd looked that last morning. Her eyes hollow with exhaustion, her voice cracked from begging. "Please, Mr. Hartley, just a few more weeks. The harvest is coming. We'll pay everything we owe." The blacksmith had laughed. Actually laughed. "I run a business, Mrs. Foster, not a charity for folks who can't manage their accounts." Daniel's hammer struck harder. The memory never faded. 3 years, and he could still hear that laugh. Could still see Margaret walking home in the rain, her shoulders bent under a weight no woman should carry alone. She'd caught fever that night, dead within the week, and Daniel had buried her in borrowed clothes because they couldn't afford a proper dress. The workshop door creaked open. "Papa!" Emma stood in the doorway, 15 years old, and carrying a plate wrapped in cloth. Her mother's eyes looked out from her young face, seeing too much understanding, more than any child should. "You left before breakfast again." Daniel set down his hammer. "Couldn't sleep." "You never sleep." Emma crossed the workshop and set the plate on his workbench. Biscuits. Bacon. Still warm. "Mrs. Patterson's wagon is ready. I saw it when I came in." "Finished it last night." "She can't pay Papa. Everyone knows her husband left her with nothing but debt." "Don't need payment." Emma's jaw tightened. The same stubborn set Margaret used to get when she was holding back words that wanted out. "What?" Daniel asked. "Nothing." "Emma." She turned to face him fully. In the lamplight, she looked older than 15. Looked like a woman who'd been raising herself while her father drowned in grief. "You help everyone, Papa. Every widow in Cedar Bend knows they can bring their broken wagons to Daniel Foster, and he won't charge a penny. But who helps you?" "Don't need help." "Mama would hate seeing you like this." The words hit like a fist to the chest. Daniel turned back to his anvil, dismissing his daughter with his silence. Emma didn't leave. She stood there stubborn as her mother waiting. "I made a vow," Daniel said finally. "At her grave. No widow in this town will ever face what your mama faced. Not while I'm breathing." "That's not living, Papa. That's just existing." "It's enough." "Is it?" Daniel had no answer. After a moment, Emma left, closing the door softly behind her. A kindness that felt like accusation. He ate the biscuits, standing up, washing them down with coffee that had gone cold hours ago. Through the window, he watched the first autumn leaves tumble past. Gold and rust falling through still air. Change was written in those leaves. Daniel didn't want change. Change meant feeling. Feeling meant hurting. And he'd hurt enough for one lifetime. The wagon appeared at mid-morning. Daniel heard it before he saw it, the distinctive groan of an axle carrying too much weight, the creak of wheels that hadn't been greased in months. He stepped out of his workshop and stopped cold. The wagon listed badly to the left, its rear wheel wobbling with every rotation. That wasn't what made him stare. 7 children filled the wagon bed. 7. The oldest couldn't have been more than 12. A boy with serious eyes and a protective arm around a girl, maybe 10. Below them, children cascaded down in size like stair steps. 2 more boys, 2 more girls, and finally, a tiny thing no older than 3, clutched in the arms of a girl who might have been 8. And driving this impossible wagon, holding the reins with white-knuckled determination, sat a woman. She was young. Too young to have 7 children, Daniel thought before he caught himself. Grief aged people. He knew that better than most. Her dress was patched but clean, her hair pulled back in a severe knot, and her face. Her face held the particular beauty of someone who'd survived loss without letting it make her hard. Brown eyes met his, desperate, proud, afraid. "Mr. Foster." "Yes, ma'am." "I'm told you fix wagons." She climbed down with careful dignity, though her hands trembled. "I'm also told you don't charge widows." "That's right. My husband died 8 months ago." The words came out flat, rehearsed, like she'd said them so many times they'd lost their meaning. "Fever took him. Left me with 7 children and a farm I can't work, and a wagon that's been breaking down piece by piece ever since." Daniel walked around the wagon, examining the damage. The rear axle was cracked, not broken clean through, but stressed in a way that suggested months of strain. The wheel wobble came from worn bearings. The tongue showed signs of old repairs done badly. "This wagon's been hurting for a while," he said. "I know." Her voice cracked just slightly. "I've been trying to hold it together with prayer and stubbornness, but—" She looked at her children, all 7 of them watching with solemn eyes. "I can't afford pride anymore, Mr. Foster. My children need to eat more than I need dignity." Something shifted in Daniel's chest. A crack in walls he'd built thick and high. "What's your name, ma'am?" "Lydia. Lydia Watson." "Well, Mrs. Watson." Daniel rolled up his sleeves. "Let's see what we can do." The children spilled out of the wagon like water from a broken dam. The oldest boy, Thomas Lydia called him, immediately positioned himself at Daniel's elbow, watching every move with hungry attention. "Can I help, sir? You know anything about wagons?" "No, sir, but I can learn." Daniel looked at the boy. 12 years old and already trying to be the man of the family. Already carrying weight no child should carry. "Hand me that spoke shave," Daniel said. "The one with the worn handle." Thomas found it instantly. Good eyes, quick mind. "Your papa teach you about tools?" "Some." Thomas's jaw tightened. "Before he got sick?" Daniel didn't push. Some wounds weren't meant to be probed. Emma appeared from the house, drawn by the commotion. She stopped short when she saw the wagon. The children, the woman standing apart with her arms wrapped around herself, like she was holding herself together by force of will. "Papa." "Emma, this is Mrs. Watson. She and her children need some help." Emma's face transformed. Daniel saw it happen, the careful distance she'd maintained since her mother's death cracking open. She looked at the smallest child, a girl with tangled hair and enormous eyes, and something soft moved across her features. "Hello?" Emma said, kneeling to the child's level. "What's your name?" "Rose." Barely a whisper. "That's a beautiful name. Are you hungry?" "Rose?" A small nod. "Emma." Lydia stepped forward, her voice tight with pride. "We don't need—" "It's just biscuits, ma'am. We've got plenty." Lydia's mouth opened, closed. Daniel watched her fight with herself, the desperate need to accept help, warring with the fierce independence that had kept her and 7 children alive for 8 months. "Thank you," she said finally. "That's very kind." Emma gathered the younger children and led them toward the house. The older ones, Thomas and a girl named Martha, who seemed to be second in command, stayed by the wagon, unwilling to let their mother out of sight. "Strong children," Daniel said quietly. "They've had to be." Lydia watched them go, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "They've had to grow up faster than any child should. I know something about that." Their eyes met. Understanding passed between them, the silent recognition of two people who'd walked through the same fire. "My Emma was 12 when her mother died," Daniel said. "She's been trying to take care of me ever since. Does a better job than I deserve. Your wife, 3 years ago, fever." He didn't mention the rest. Didn't mention the begging, or the borrowed clothes, or the vow made in October rain. "I'm sorry." "So am I." Daniel turned back to the wagon. "Now, this axle needs replacing entirely. I can reinforce it temporarily, but it won't hold forever." "I understand. I'll need to order the wood from Miller's Lumber. Take about a week to arrive." Lydia's face went pale. "A week I can't—" She stopped herself, swallowed whatever she'd been about to say. "I'll manage. Where are you staying?" "The old Harrison place, 5 miles north." Daniel knew it. A tumble-down farmhouse that had been abandoned for years. Drafty, probably leaking, and miles from town, on a road that turned to mud at the first rain. "That's a long way to travel with 7 children, and a wagon that might not make it." "We'll manage," Lydia said again, and this time her voice held steel. Daniel recognized that steel. Margaret had it too. The kind of strength that came from having no choice but to be strong. "Ma'am." "Lydia." "Lydia." He said her name carefully, tasting it. "I'm not offering charity, but I've got a barn that's not being used for much but storage. Warm, dry, big enough for a family to shelter while their wagon gets fixed proper." Her eyes widened. "Mr. Foster, I couldn't—" "It's practical is all. You stay 5 miles out. That wagon might not make the trip again. You stay here, I can fix it right." And what would people say? A widow and her 7 children staying in a single man's barn. Let people say what they want. I stopped caring about Cedar Bend's opinions when they let my wife die begging for help. The words came out harder than he'd intended. Lydia flinched, not from fear, but from recognition. "They did that to her. To your wife." The blacksmith, Hartley, turned her away when she asked for time to pay what we owed. Said he ran a business, not a charity. Daniel's hands clenched at his sides. She walked home in the rain, caught fever, dead within a week. Lydia was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was soft. "Is that why you do this, fix wagons for free help widows who have nothing to offer in return?" "It's what I can do. It's all I can do." "No." Lydia stepped closer, close enough that he could see the gold flecks in her brown eyes. "It's not all you can do, but it's a start." They moved into the barn that evening. Emma helped organize the chaos. 7 children required considerable organizing, while Daniel cleared space and hauled in straw for bedding. Lydia protested every kindness, accepted every one, and somehow managed to thank him without losing her dignity. By nightfall, the children were fed warm and asleep in a row, like baby birds in a nest. Thomas stood watch by the barn door, refusing to rest until his mother did. "He does that every night," Lydia told Daniel quietly. "Thinks he needs to protect us. He's 12 years old, and he thinks the weight of the world rests on his shoulders." Sounds familiar. Lydia smiled, the first real smile he'd seen from her. "Your Emma said the same thing about you." "Did she now?" "She said her father works himself to exhaustion helping everyone but himself. Said he hasn't smiled since her mother died." Daniel didn't know how to answer that. The truth was uncomfortable. "She also said you're the best man she knows." Lydia's voice dropped lower. "And that you deserve to be happy again." "Emma talks too much." "Emma loves you. That's different." They stood in the doorway of the barn, watching the stars emerge one by one. The October air carried the smell of wood smoke and coming winter. "How did your husband die?" Daniel asked. "If you don't mind my asking." "Fever, same as your wife." Lydia's voice stayed steady, but he saw her hands twist in her apron. "He was a good man, John Watson. Not fancy or educated, but good. He loved our children more than life itself. worked himself half to death trying to provide for us. The other half, the fever finished what the work started. She paused. He held on for 3 weeks, talking to the children when he could, making me promise things. What kind of things? That I wouldn't give up, that I'd keep the family together no matter what, that I'd find a way to survive. Her voice cracked. He didn't say how, just that I would, like believing it could make it true. Maybe it did. Lydia looked at him. What do you mean? You're here, aren't you? 7 children and a broken wagon and 8 months of struggle, and you're still here, still fighting. I don't feel like I'm fighting. I feel like I'm drowning. Sometimes they're the same thing. A long silence. Comfortable. The kind of silence that happens between people who understand each other without needing words. I should get some sleep, Lydia said finally. Thank you, Mr. Foster. For everything. Daniel. What? My name is Daniel. If you're going to stay in my barn and let me fix your wagon and feed your children, you might as well use my name. Another smile, smaller this time, but warmer. Good night, Daniel. Good night, Lydia. He watched her walk into the barn, watched her check on each child with the automatic care of a mother who'd been doing this alone for too long, watched her finally settle onto the straw pallet beside the youngest girl. Something shifted in his chest again. That same crack widening. Daniel turned and walked back to his workshop, lit the lamp, picked up his hammer. But he didn't strike the anvil. Instead, he stood there in the lamplight, thinking about brown eyes and 7 children, and the way Lydia Watson had smiled at him, like he was somebody worth smiling at. The lamp in the window burned steady, visible from the road. For 3 years, it had been a promise to the dead. Tonight, for the first time, Daniel wondered if it might become a promise to the living. The week passed faster than any week in Daniel's memory. 7 children transformed his quiet existence into controlled chaos. They were everywhere, in the workshop, in the barn, in Emma's kitchen, in corners he'd forgotten existed. They asked endless questions, demanded constant attention, and filled his house with a noise he hadn't realized he'd been missing. Thomas became his shadow. The boy arrived at the workshop each morning before dawn, ready to learn whatever Daniel would teach him. Why do you heat the iron before you shape it? Makes it soft enough to bend. Too cold it'll crack. Too hot it loses its strength. Like people? Daniel looked at the boy, 12 years old and already thinking in metaphors. Yeah, he said slowly. Like people. Martha, the 10-year-old, appointed herself Emma's assistant. Together they cooked, cleaned, mended, and managed the younger children with the efficiency of generals commanding an army. She's wonderful, Emma told Daniel one evening. Smart as a whip and organized. She's been helping her mother run that household since she was 8. Sounds like someone else I know. Emma's cheeks pinked. I like her, Papa. I like all of them. She didn't say what Daniel could see in her eyes. That she'd been lonely too. That caring for him hadn't been enough. That she'd needed someone to make their house feel like a home again. And Lydia. Daniel found himself watching for her, listening for her voice among the children's chatter. Noticing when she laughed, which wasn't often enough. Noticing when she worried, which was almost always. She worked constantly despite his protests, mending clothes, helping Emma cook, even sweeping his workshop when she thought he wasn't looking. You don't have to do that, he said one afternoon, catching her with the broom. I know, she kept sweeping. But I can't just take from you, Daniel. It doesn't sit right. You're not taking, I offered. You offered your barn and your food and your time. That's more than anyone's given us in 8 months. She stopped sweeping, leaning on the broom handle. The people in town, they look at us like we're a burden, like we're something shameful. You're not a burden. 7 children and no husband and a farm I can't work. Her laugh was bitter. That's the definition of a burden according to Cedar Bend. Daniel crossed the workshop and took the broom from her hands. Set it aside. When Margaret died, he said, "People in town told me I should move on. Find a new wife. A man needs a woman, they said. Like she was just a position that needed filling." Lydia's eyes widened. They didn't understand. Moving on isn't about replacing what you lost. It's about finding a way to carry it with you. Some people never figure that out. And did you figure it out? I thought I did. Daniel's voice dropped. Thought I could carry Margaret's memory by keeping her promises, by helping the people she would have helped, by being the man she believed I could be. That sounds like a heavy load. It is. He met her eyes. But lately it feels lighter. The air between them thickened, changed. Lydia stepped back first. Not from fear, Daniel realized. From the same thing he felt, the terrifying awareness of standing at the edge of something that couldn't be undone. I should check on the children, she said. Lydia. The wagon's almost fixed, isn't it? The question hit like cold water. Daniel nodded slowly. Another day or two, he said. The axle's cured. Just need to fit it proper. Then we'll be out of your way. You're not in my way. Daniel. She said his name like a warning. Don't. Please. Don't what? Don't make this harder than it needs to be. You've been kind, kinder than anyone since John died. But we both know what this is. What is it? Charity. The word came out hard. Charity from a good man who made a promise to his dead wife. That's all. She walked away before he could answer. Daniel stood alone in his workshop, surrounded by tools and sawdust, and the sweet smell of cured wood, and felt something crack in his chest that had nothing to do with charity at all. That night, he dreamed of Margaret. She stood in the kitchen of their old house, the one they'd had before the debts, before the borrowed clothes, before everything fell apart. Flour dusted her apron, and her hair was coming loose from its pins, and she was laughing at something he couldn't hear. Daniel? She said, and her voice was exactly as he remembered it. Warm, knowing, full of love she never tried to hide. Daniel, you stubborn fool. Margaret. 3 years. She shook her head. 3 years of punishing yourself for something that wasn't your fault. 3 years of building walls and calling it loyalty. I made you a promise. You made me a promise to help widows, not to become a ghost yourself. She crossed the kitchen and took his face in her hands. Her palms were cool against his cheeks. I loved you, Daniel Foster. I loved you because you were kind and stubborn, and you never gave up on anything you cared about. I haven't given up. You gave up on yourself. Her eyes blue as summer sky filled with tears. You gave up on happiness. You gave up on living. And you've been so busy keeping your promise to the dead that you've forgotten how to keep faith with the living. I don't know how anymore. Yes, you do. Margaret smiled that smile that had captured him at a Sunday social when they were both too young to know better. You just have to be brave enough to try. Daniel woke with tears on his face and Margaret's name on his lips. Outside his window, the first light of dawn touched the sky. In the barn he could hear children stirring. Lydia's voice, soft and patient, guiding them through the morning routine. And somewhere in his chest, beneath the walls and the grief and the 3 years of careful numbness, something new was growing. Something that felt terrifyingly like hope. Daniel finished the axle before sunrise. He'd worked through the night, unable to sleep after the dream. Margaret's voice still echoed in his mind. Her words, her challenge. The accusation wrapped in love that only she could deliver. The wagon stood complete, stronger than when Lydia had first arrived, ready to carry her and 7 children back to that tumble-down farmhouse 5 miles north, ready to take them away. Daniel set down his tools and stared at his work. Perfect craftsmanship, solid joints, an axle that would last 20 years if properly maintained. He'd never hated a wagon more. It's finished. He turned. Lydia stood in the workshop doorway, her shawl pulled tight against the morning chill. Her eyes moved from the wagon to his face and back again. "You worked all night." "Couldn't sleep." "Neither could I." They stood in silence. The lamp flame guttered in its glass, burning low on oil. Outside, a rooster crowed. The world was waking up indifferent to the weight of what hung between them. "We'll leave today," Lydia said. "Get out of your way." "You're not in my way. I told you that." "Daniel." "Stay for breakfast. The children should eat before a 5-mile journey." Lydia hesitated. He saw the war on her face, pride against need independence, against the desperate wish to remain in the first safe place she'd found in 8 months. "Breakfast," she agreed finally. "Then we go." Emma had already started cooking when they reached the house. The kitchen was chaos. 7 children at various stages of wakefulness, Thomas trying to maintain order, Martha helping Emma flip pancakes, the little ones underfoot everywhere. "Mrs. Watson." Rose ran to Lydia and wrapped her arms around her mother's legs. "Emma says we can have honey on our pancakes. Can we? Please. If there's enough to share." "There's plenty," Emma said quickly. Too quickly. Daniel saw her exchange a look with Martha. A conspiracy of children who didn't want this morning to end. Breakfast stretched longer than necessary. 2nd helpings. 3rd helpings for Thomas, who was growing faster than his clothes could keep up. Stories from the children about the barn cats they'd named, the games they'd invented, the corner of the workshop where they'd built a fort from wood scraps. Daniel ate in silence, watching, memorizing. The way Rose laughed with her whole body. The way Thomas tried to act grown while still being young. The way Martha mothered the little ones with Emma's guidance. The way Lydia's eyes softened when she looked at her children, all the fear and exhaustion dropping away to reveal the love beneath. "Papa." Emma's hand on his arm, her voice low enough that only he could hear. "Do something." "There's nothing to do." "There's everything to do. Ask her to stay." "It's not that simple." "Yes, it is." Emma's grip tightened. "You love her. I can see it. She loves you too, even if she's too proud to admit it. Why are you letting her walk away? Because she deserves better than a broken man who's only half alive." "Then stop being half alive." Daniel looked at his daughter, 15 years old and wiser than he'd ever be. Margaret's eyes, Margaret's stubbornness, Margaret's unflinching honesty. "I don't know how," he admitted. "Start by asking her to stay." Before Daniel could respond, a knock thundered on the front door. Heavy, demanding. The kind of knock that expected to be answered immediately. Thomas was on his feet, instantly positioning himself between the door and his siblings. Lydia rose more slowly, her face going pale. "Who would come calling this early?" Emma asked. But Lydia knew. Daniel could see it in the set of her shoulders, the way her hands trembled as she smoothed her apron. "It's him," she whispered. "It's finally him." Daniel crossed to the door and opened it. A man stood on the porch, tall, heavy-set, with the soft hands of someone who'd never done honest work. His coat was fine wool, his boots polished his expression, that particular mixture of contempt and entitlement that money bred into certain people. "I'm looking for Lydia Watson." His voice matched his face. "I was told she'd taken refuge here." "Who's asking?" "Silas Crane." The man smiled, and there was nothing pleasant in it. "I hold the deed to her farm, and I've come to collect what's owed." Daniel's blood ran cold. Silas Crane. He knew that name. Everyone in Cedar Bend knew that name. The banker who'd bought up half the mortgages in the territory. The man who'd foreclosed on 3 families last winter alone. The man who Daniel's hands clenched at his sides. The man who'd denied Margaret a loan when she'd begged for help. The man who'd laughed and told her that charity wasn't his business. "Mrs. Watson is a guest in my home," Daniel said. "Whatever business you have with her can wait." I'm afraid it can't. Crane pulled a folded paper from his coat. Her husband owed me $300 when he died. The debt transfers to his widow. She's had 8 months to pay, and I've been more than patient. Patient! Lydia pushed past Daniel, her fear transformed to fury. You've sent men to threaten me twice. You've told everyone in town not to give us credit. You've made it impossible for me to sell my crops or find work. I've protected my investment, Mrs. Watson. There's a difference. There's no difference at all. You want my land. You've wanted it since John refused to sell it to you. Crane's smile widened. Your husband was a stubborn man. I see you share the trait. But stubbornness doesn't pay debts. I'll pay what we owe. I just need more time. You've had 8 months. I'm done waiting. He held up the paper. This is a court order. You have 30 days to pay the full amount plus interest. If you don't, the farm becomes mine and you become homeless. Daniel stepped forward. How much? Crane turned to him, one eyebrow raised. Excuse me. How much does she owe total? $347. Principal plus 8 months of interest. Daniel's stomach dropped. That was more than a year's wages for most men. More than he had saved. More than she doesn't have it, Crane said, reading his face. And neither do you, I'd wager. The noble wagon maker who works for free. Very admirable. Very foolish. Get off my property. Gladly. I've delivered my message. Crane tucked the paper back into his coat. 30 days, Mrs. Watson. I suggest you spend them preparing your children for life in a boarding house, if you can find one that will take 7 at once. He tipped his hat with mocking courtesy and walked back to his waiting carriage. The driver clicked the horses forward, and Silas Crane disappeared down the road toward town. Daniel turned. Lydia stood frozen, her face ashen. Behind her, 7 children stared with wide eyes. Thomas had his fists clenched. Martha was holding Rose, who'd started to cry. Mama. The smallest boy. Samuel tugged at Lydia's skirt. Are we going to be homeless? No, sweetheart. Lydia's voice cracked. No, we're not going to be homeless. But her eyes told a different story. Everyone inside, Emma said, taking charge. There's more pancakes, and I think I saw some jam in the pantry. Thomas, help me. Thomas hesitated, looking at his mother. She nodded a small motion, and he followed Emma into the kitchen. Martha herded the younger children after them. Daniel and Lydia stood alone on the porch. $347, she said. I don't have 347 cents. I don't have anything. We'll figure something out. How? She turned to him, and the calm facade shattered. How, Daniel, I've sold everything we had except the wagon and the clothes on our backs. I've worked myself to exhaustion for 8 months, and it's still not enough. It will never be enough. There has to be a way. There is no way. Silas Crane owns half the town. No one will help me because they're afraid of him. No one will hire me because he's told them not to. He's been circling us like a vulture since John died, just waiting for the right moment to... Her voice broke. The tears she'd been holding back for months finally spilled over. Daniel did the only thing he could think of. He stepped forward and pulled her into his arms. She resisted for 1 heartbeat. 2. Then she collapsed against his chest, sobbing with the desperate abandon of someone who'd been strong for too long. It's not fair, she gasped. John worked so hard. He did everything right. He was a good man, a good father, and he died anyway. And now they want to take even his memory from us. The house he built, the land he cleared, the life he dreamed of for his children. Daniel held her tighter. Her grief was a living thing, raw and terrible and achingly familiar. I know, he said. I know. How do you bear it? She pulled back, looking up at him with red-rimmed eyes. 3 years without your wife. How do you get up every morning? How do you keep going? I don't know. I just do, 1 day at a time, 1 repair at a time, 1 act of kindness at a time. He brushed a tear from her cheek. You survive because the alternative is giving up. And you've got 7 reasons not to give up. What if it's not enough? What if I fail them? You won't. You don't know that. I know you." Daniel's voice dropped. "I've watched you for a week. I've seen how you hold this family together with nothing but love and stubbornness. I've seen you smile at your children when you're terrified inside. I've seen you work until your hands bleed and never once complain." Lydia's breath caught. "You're not going to fail them," Daniel continued. "Because you're the strongest person I've ever met, stronger than me, stronger than anyone in this town. And if Silas Crane thinks he can break you, he doesn't know who he's dealing with." "Daniel, stay." The word hung between them. "What?" "Stay. Don't go back to that farmhouse. Stay here, all of you." "I can't do that. The scandal alone. I don't care about scandal. I care about you. About your children." He took a breath. "About my daughter who's smiled more this week than she has in 3 years. About Thomas who's learning a trade that could give him a future. About Rose who finally has someone to play with." "Daniel, what are you saying?" "I'm saying—" He stopped. Started again. "I'm saying that my house has been empty for 3 years. That I've been empty. That I made a vow to help widows but I never expected to—" He couldn't finish. The words stuck in his throat, too new, too terrifying, too raw. Lydia saved him. She reached up and pressed her hand against his cheek. "I know," she said softly. "I know." They stood like that for a long moment, not moving, not speaking, just breathing the same air, sharing the same impossible hope. 30 days, Lydia said finally. "That's what we have. Then we'll figure something out in 30 days. We. She smiled. It was small and fragile and wet with tears, but it was real. "All right," she said. "We stay." The news spread through Cedar Bend like wildfire. By noon, everyone knew that the widow Watson had moved into Daniel Foster's home with her 7 children. By evening, the speculation had grown wild. They were married in secret. They were living in sin. She was a gold digger after his property. He was a fool who'd been seduced by a pretty face. Daniel heard the whispers when he went to town for supplies, saw the sideways glances, felt the judgment in every direction. "Daniel Foster." Mrs. Henderson blocked his path outside the general store. "I hope you know what you're doing taking in that woman." "I'm helping a family in need, Mrs. Henderson, same as I've always done. 7 children is quite a lot of need, and a young widow living under your roof." She sniffed. "People talk, Daniel. They say things. Let them talk. I stopped caring about Cedar Bend's opinions a long time ago." "You may not care about your reputation, but what about that daughter of yours? What about—" "My daughter is happier than she's been in 3 years. If that costs me the good opinion of gossips, so be it." He pushed past her and into the store. Behind him, he heard her sharp intake of breath. Ahead of him, he saw 3 women quickly look away, their interrupted conversation hanging obvious in the air. Daniel bought his supplies and left without speaking to anyone else. That evening, Emma found him in the workshop. He was sharpening tools, a task that required attention but not thought. Something to do with his hands while his mind wrestled with problems too big to solve. "Mrs. Henderson came by," Emma said. Daniel's jaw tightened. What did she want? To offer advice. "She thinks Lydia is taking advantage of you. She thinks I should convince you to send them away before your reputation is ruined completely." "And what did you tell her?" Emma smiled. "I told her that my mother raised me to judge people by their actions, not their circumstances, and that if she had nothing kind to say, she was welcome to keep her opinions to herself." Despite everything, Daniel laughed. "Your mother would be proud. She'd also tell you to stop hiding in the workshop and go talk to Lydia. She's in the barn pretending to mend clothes while actually worrying herself sick." "She has reason to worry." "So give her reason to hope." Emma left. Daniel set down his tools and sat for a moment in the lamplight. His daughter was right. His dead wife speaking through a dream had been right. Everyone could see what he was too afraid to admit. He was in love with Lydia Watson. He'd been in love with her since the moment she climbed down from that broken wagon with 7 children and more courage than anyone he'd ever met. He'd been falling deeper every day, watching her strength, her tenderness, her refusal to break, no matter how much weight the world piled on her shoulders. And in 30 days, Silas Crane would take everything from her, unless Daniel found a way to stop him. He stood and walked to the barn. Lydia was exactly where Emma had said, sitting on a hay bale with a pile of mending in her lap. Her hands moved automatically, but her eyes were distant, lost in thought. "The children are asleep," she said without looking up. "Martha's reading to the little ones. Thomas is standing guard again. That boy needs to rest. He needs to feel useful. It's how he manages the fear." Daniel sat beside her, close but not touching. "I went to town today. People are talking." "I know. Martha heard some women at the well this morning. They called me." She stopped, swallowed. "It doesn't matter what they called me. It matters to me." "Why?" She finally looked at him. "Why do you care so much, Daniel? You barely know us. We've been here a week. That's nothing." "It's not nothing. Not to me." "Then what is it, charity duty? Your promise to your dead wife?" "It started that way. I won't lie to you." Daniel's voice dropped. "When you showed up with that wagon, I thought you were just another widow who needed help. Another way to keep my promise. Another distraction from the emptiness. And now I can't imagine this place without your children's laughter, without Emma smiling again, without—" He hesitated. "Without you." Lydia's hands stilled on her mending. "Don't," she whispered. "Don't say things you don't mean." "I mean every word." "You don't know me, Daniel. Not really. You don't know the mistakes I've made, the things I've done to keep my children fed. Then tell me." She was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was barely audible. "After John died, I sold everything I could. The livestock, the equipment, my mother's jewelry. When that ran out, I took in washing. Worked until my hands cracked and bled. It still wasn't enough. Lydia. I went to Silas Crane 3 months ago, begged him for more time. He said—" Her voice hardened. "He said he might consider it, if I was willing to be friendly." Daniel's blood ran cold. I refused, slapped him across the face and walked out. A bitter laugh. That's when he started turning the whole town against me, when he told people not to hire me, when he made sure we couldn't buy supplies on credit anywhere. That's why no one would help you. Cedar Bend is afraid of him. Everyone owes him something. Everyone knows what happens to people who cross him. She looked at Daniel directly. "Now you've taken us in. Now you've crossed him too. He won't forget that." "Good." "Good, Daniel. You don't understand?" "I understand perfectly." Daniel stood, his hands clenched at his sides. "I understand that Silas Crane is a bully who preys on people when they're weakest. I understand that he uses money like a weapon. And I understand that someone needs to stand up to him. He'll destroy you. He can try. This isn't your fight." "Yes, it is." Daniel turned to face her. "It became my fight the moment you drove that wagon into my yard. It became my fight when your children smiled at my daughter. It became my fight when I realized that I'd been dead for 3 years and you made me want to live again." Lydia's eyes glistened. "I'm not going to let him take your home," Daniel said. "I'm not going to let him separate your family. And I'm not going to let him win. Not this time. Not like he won when my wife died, begging for mercy he refused to give." "What did you say?" "Silas Crane was the banker who denied Margaret a loan. The one who laughed when she asked for help." Daniel's voice cracked. "She died because no one would stand up for her. Because everyone was too afraid of him to do what was right." Lydia rose slowly. "You never told me that." "I couldn't. The words wouldn't come. He looked at her. But I'm telling you now. And I'm telling you that I won't watch it happen again. I won't let another woman He stopped. Another woman you what? Lydia stepped closer. Say it, Daniel. I can't. Why not? Because I'm scared. The admission cost him everything. Because losing Margaret nearly killed me. Because if I let myself really feel it, and then lose you too. You think I'm not scared? Lydia reached up and took his face in her hands. I've got 7 children depending on me. A debt I can't pay. A future that looks impossible. I'm terrified every single moment of every single day. Then how do you do it? How do you keep going? Because fear isn't a reason to stop living. It's a reason to hold tighter to the things that matter. She kissed him. It was soft, brief, barely more than a brush of lips against lips. But it changed everything. When she pulled back, Daniel saw his own fear reflected in her eyes, his own hope, his own desperate wish that this impossible thing might somehow become real. 29 days, she said. That's what we have left. Then we'd better make them count. Outside the barn, the night pressed in, cold and dark and full of uncertainty. But inside, 2 people who'd thought they'd never love again stood holding on to each other like survivors of a shipwreck. And somewhere in the darkness, a plan began to form. They would need 29 days. They would need every friend they could find. And they would need to do something that no one in Cedar Bend had ever done before. They would need to break Silas Crane. The plan started with a list. Daniel sat at his workbench the next morning, scratching names onto a piece of brown paper. Every widow he'd helped over the past 3 years. Every farmer who'd paid him with gratitude instead of coin. Every family that owed Silas Crane money and lived in fear of his knock on their door. That's a lot of names, Emma said, reading over his shoulder. Crane's been bleeding this town dry for years. People are scared, but scared people can get angry if you give them a reason. What kind of reason? The kind that shows them they're not alone. Lydia appeared in the doorway. She'd slept little, Daniel could tell, but her eyes held something new. Purpose. Fight. Thomas found something, she said. In his father's papers. You need to see this. They gathered in the kitchen. Thomas stood at the table, a stack of yellowed documents spread before him. His young face was grim. Papa kept records of everything, Thomas said. Every transaction, every payment, every conversation with Mr. Crane. What kind of conversations? Thomas pointed to a letter. This one's from 2 years ago. Mr. Crane offered to buy our land for $200. Papa said no. A week later, our well went bad. Papa wrote here that he suspected someone poisoned it. Daniel's jaw tightened. And this one. Thomas pulled out another paper. 6 months before Papa died, Mr. Crane raised the interest on our loan without warning. Papa went to the bank to argue. Mr. Crane told him Papa wrote it down exactly. You can pay what I ask, or you can watch your family starve. Either way, that land will be mine eventually. Lydia's hand flew to her mouth. He's been targeting us for years, Thomas said. Before Papa even got sick, he wanted our land, and when Papa wouldn't sell, he started squeezing us, making it impossible to survive. Why your land specifically? Daniel asked. I don't know, but Papa thought it was important. He made me promise to keep these papers safe, said they might matter someday. Emma leaned forward. Mr. Foster, if Crane's been doing this to the Watsons, he's probably done it to others. That's what I'm counting on. Daniel grabbed his hat and headed for the door. Where are you going? Lydia called after him. To find out if we're the only ones with stories to tell. He started with the Patterson farm. Sarah Patterson had been widowed 2 winters ago when her husband's heart gave out during a blizzard. Daniel had fixed her wagon 3 times since then, never taking a penny. Daniel Foster. She stood in her doorway, wiping flour-dusted hands on her apron. What brings you out this way? I need to ask you something, Mrs. Patterson. About Silas Crane. Her face went pale. I can't talk about him. Can't or won't? Both. He holds my mortgage, Daniel. One word from him and I lose everything. What if I told you he's been doing the same thing to other families, targeting them, squeezing them, taking their land piece by piece? Sarah's eyes darted left and right, checking if anyone was watching. Then she stepped back and opened the door wider. Come inside, quickly. Her story was familiar. A loan with terms that changed without warning. Interest that compounded faster than it should. Threats delivered through lawyers and hired men. A constant grinding pressure designed to break her spirit and take her home. My husband borrowed $200 for seed 5 years ago, she said. I've paid back nearly $400, and Crane says I still owe $300 more. The numbers don't make sense, but when I questioned them, he said I could take it up with a judge who owes him money just like everyone else. Would you be willing to say this publicly in front of the whole town? Fear flickered across her face. He'd destroy me. He's already destroying you, slowly, on his timeline. Daniel leaned forward. What if you weren't alone? What if a dozen families stood up together, 100? What could he do against all of us? Sarah was silent for a long moment. Then quietly, who else have you talked to? You're the first, but I've got a list. Let me see it. Daniel handed her the paper. She read through the names, her lips moving silently. When she looked up, something had changed in her eyes. The Hendersons lost their store last year. Crane foreclosed on them in the dead of winter. They never recovered. She pointed to another name. The Miller family. Their son died in an accident at Crane's lumber mill. They tried to get compensation, but Crane buried them in legal fees until they gave up. All connected to Crane. Everything in this town connects to Crane. That's how he wants it. Sarah set the paper down. I'll talk to people. Quietly. Find out who else might be willing to stand up. Be careful. I've been careful for 2 years. Careful is just another word for scared. She straightened her shoulders. Maybe it's time to be something else. Daniel visited 6 more families that day. The stories varied in details, but not in substance. Silas Crane had spent years building a web of debt and fear that trapped nearly everyone in Cedar Bend. Some families had lost everything already. Others were holding on by their fingernails, one bad harvest away from ruin. But everywhere Daniel went, he found the same thing underneath the fear. Anger. Anger at being squeezed. Anger at being threatened. Anger at watching neighbors destroyed while no one lifted a finger to help. The anger had been buried deep, hidden beneath layers of survival instinct and self-preservation. But it was there, waiting for someone to strike the match. By evening, Daniel had commitments from 8 families. Not enough to confront Crane directly, but enough to start building something larger. He returned home exhausted, but hopeful. The kitchen was warm with cooking smells, and for one disorienting moment, he forgot this wasn't his family. Forgot that Lydia and her children were guests, temporary residents of a life that felt increasingly permanent. Papa. Rose ran to him the moment he stepped inside. She'd taken to calling him that 2 days ago, and neither Daniel nor Lydia had corrected her. Thomas taught me to whittle. Look. She held up a lopsided wooden bird, more suggestion than sculpture. That's beautiful, sweetheart. It's a sparrow, like the ones outside my window. Thomas says sparrows are tough. They survive anything. Daniel looked at Thomas, standing quiet in the corner. The boy nodded once, acknowledging what they both understood. Some lessons couldn't be taught with words. Where's your mama? In the barn. With Emma. They've been talking for hours. Daniel found them huddled over Lydia's mending basket, heads close together. They stopped when he entered, which told him everything he needed to know. Conspiring. Planning. Emma corrected. There's a difference. And what exactly are you planning? Lydia stood smoothing her apron. A gathering. Here. 3 days from now. What kind of gathering? The kind where women talk, Share recipes, swap fabric, pretend everything's normal. Her eyes met his. And compare notes on every family Silas Crane has ever wronged. Daniel stared at her. That's dangerous. So is doing nothing. If Crane finds out, he won't. Women's gossip, Daniel. That's all anyone will see. Just a bunch of widows and wives getting together to sew and chatter. Lydia's smile held an edge. Men like Crane don't pay attention to women's gossip. They think it's beneath them. She's right, Papa. Emma stepped forward. I've already talked to Martha and Mrs. Patterson's daughter. Word is spreading. By tomorrow, every woman in Cedar Bend will know about the gathering, and every one of them has a story. Daniel looked between his daughter and the woman he loved. 2 generations of the same fierce determination. You've already set this in motion, haven't you? Yesterday, Lydia admitted. While you were making your list, we were making ours. And you didn't think to tell me. I'm telling you now. Daniel wanted to argue, wanted to protect them from the consequences of defying a man as powerful as Silas Crane. But the truth was simpler and harder. They didn't need his protection. They needed his partnership. All right, he said. 3 days. What do you need me to do? Lydia's smile softened. Stay out of the way and let us work. The gathering happened on a Wednesday afternoon. 23 women crowded into Daniel's house ostensibly for quilting. They brought fabric and thread and recipes to share. They also brought ledgers, letters, and stories they'd never told anyone before. Daniel stayed in the workshop as instructed, but he could hear the rising voices through the walls. Anger finding its voice. Fear transforming into purpose. Emma slipped out after 2 hours, her face flushed with excitement. It's working, Papa. They're talking, really talking. Mrs. Henderson, the same one who warned you about Lydia, she broke down crying when she told everyone how Crane threatened her husband. Said if anyone knew how she really felt, she'd be ruined. But then Mrs. Patterson held her hand and said, we all feel the same. We've just been too scared to admit it. What happens now? Lydia wants to compile everything. Make a record of every family Crane has wronged. Every payment that didn't match the books. Every threat. Every foreclosure. Every suspicious accident. Evidence. Ammunition. The word hung in the air. This wasn't just a quilting circle anymore. It was the beginning of a revolt. There's something else, Emma said. Mrs. Carter, her husband works at the bank. She says Crane keeps 2 sets of books. The real ones and the ones he shows to auditors. If someone could get access to those records, that's theft. It's justice. Daniel shook his head. We can't ask anyone to take that kind of risk. We're not asking. Emma's chin lifted. Mrs. Carter already volunteered. She said her husband owes Crane money too. Said they'd do anything to see him finally pay for what he's done. Before Daniel could respond, the workshop door burst open. Thomas stood there, chest-heaving terror in his eyes. Mr. Fostermen coming. 3 of them, on horseback. They look like Crane's men. Daniel grabbed his shotgun from the wall. Get the women out the back. Take them through the woods to the Patterson place. Go! Thomas ran. Daniel checked his weapon and stepped onto the porch. 3 riders approached just as Thomas had said. Hard men with hard faces. The kind Crane used for enforcement when intimidation wasn't enough. Daniel Foster. The lead rider didn't dismount. His hand rested on the pistol at his hip. Who's asking? Mr. Crane sends his regards. And his displeasure. Does he now? Word is you've been visiting families. Asking questions. Stirring up trouble. The rider smiled. Mr. Crane doesn't appreciate trouble. Then Mr. Crane should stop causing it. The smile vanished. This is a warning, Foster. Mind your own business. The Watson widow isn't your concern. She's living under my roof. That makes her my concern. For now. The rider glanced toward the house. Nice place you've got here. Be a shame if something happened to it. Fire spreads fast in dry weather. Daniel raised the shotgun. Get off my land. Think carefully, Foster. Crane's got a long memory and a longer reach. You're one man. He's got 50. This fight ends only one way. Then why are you here warning me instead of doing something about it? The rider's face flickered. Uncertainty. Just for a moment, but Daniel caught it. Because Mr. Crane is a reasonable man. He'd rather resolve this peacefully. Peacefully means me walking away, letting him destroy Lydia Watson and her 7 children, letting him keep strangling this town. Peacefully means you surviving. I stopped being afraid of dying 3 years ago, about the time I buried my wife in borrowed clothes because men like your boss wouldn't give her a chance. Silence. The rider exchanged glances with his companions. You've been warned, he said finally. What happens next is on your head. They rode away. Daniel watched until they disappeared, then lowered the shotgun. His hands were steady, but his heart pounded. Lydia appeared beside him. I told Thomas to take the women home through the woods. I heard. They know Daniel, about the gathering, about what we're doing. Yeah. This is going to get worse before it gets better. I know. She slipped her hand into his. Her fingers were cold, trembling slightly. Are you scared? She asked. Terrified. Good. She squeezed his hand. Scared means you're paying attention. That night, after the children were asleep, Daniel and Lydia sat together in the workshop. The lamp burned low, casting long shadows. 22 days, Lydia said. That's what we have left. The evidence we're gathering, it might not be enough. Crane owns the judge, owns half the lawyers in the territory. Even if we can prove what he's done, who's going to hold him accountable, then we don't go through the courts. Daniel looked at her. What do you mean? I mean we go over his head, past the county, past the territory. Lydia's eyes gleamed. My husband's cousin works for a newspaper in Denver, a real newspaper, not one Crane controls. If we could get the evidence to him. You want to expose Crane publicly. I want to destroy him, the way he's destroyed so many others. Her voice hardened. Is that wrong? No, it's human. Then help me. Help me take everything from him the way he's trying to take everything from us. Daniel thought of Margaret, of her gentle heart and her fierce love. She'd always believed in second chances and redemption, in the basic goodness of people. But some people weren't good. Some people were poison dressed up in fine clothes and legal documents. Some people needed to be stopped, not saved. All right, he said. Tell me about this cousin. The letter went out the next morning. Thomas rode to the next town to post it, avoiding Cedar Bend entirely. They couldn't risk Crane intercepting it. And then they waited. 3 days. 4. A week. Each morning Daniel expected more riders, more threats, more violence. None came. He's planning something, Lydia said on the 8th day. Crane doesn't back down. He doesn't let challenges go unanswered. Maybe he's worried. The gathering spooked him. Men like Crane don't get spooked. They get strategic. She was right. Daniel knew it in his bones. Silas Crane wasn't retreating. He was regrouping. The answer came on a Sunday morning. Daniel woke to shouting. He grabbed his shotgun and ran outside to find half the town gathered in front of his property. Not attacking, just standing. Watching. In the center of the crowd stood Silas Crane himself. Mr. Foster. Crane's voice carried easily, smooth as oil. What a crowd we've gathered. I hope you don't mind. I thought this matter deserved witnesses. Daniel walked forward, Lydia right behind him. What matter would that be? The matter of fraud, conspiracy, defamation. Crane pulled papers from his coat. I have here sworn statements from 3 upstanding citizens of Cedar Bend. They allege that you and Mrs. Watson have been spreading lies about me, encouraging others to break their legal contracts. attempting to undermine legitimate business practices. Those aren't lies and you know it. Do I? Crane smiled. What I know, Mr. Foster, is that you've been harboring a woman who owes me a substantial debt. I know you've been interfering in private business matters, and I know that under territorial law that makes you liable for her obligations. Daniel's blood went cold. That's right. Crane continued reading his face. $347. Due in full. From both of you now. Unless, of course, Mrs. Watson would like to reconsider my earlier offer. Lydia stepped forward. Her voice was ice. I'd rather die than let you touch me. That can be arranged. Crane's smile vanished. You have 14 days, both of you. Pay what's owed or lose everything. He turned to the crowd. Let this be a lesson. I am a reasonable man. I offer fair terms. But those who cheat me, lie about me, conspire against me, they face consequences. Remember that, all of you. He walked to his carriage and drove away. The crowd dispersed slowly, leaving Daniel and Lydia standing alone. 14 days, she whispered. He cut our time in half. He's scared. That's why he's pushing. Or he knows something we don't. They went back inside. The children were awake now, gathered in the kitchen with Emma. 7 frightened faces, and 1 determined one. What happens now? Thomas asked. Daniel looked at Lydia. She looked at him. Now, Daniel said, we fight back. The response from Denver came 3 days later. Thomas brought the letter at a dead run, waving it over his head like a flag. Daniel tore it open and read aloud while Lydia and Emma crowded close. Dear Mrs. Watson, your account of Mr. Crane's activities is deeply concerning. I have colleagues who have investigated similar patterns in other territories: predatory lending, manipulated records, intimidation of witnesses. If you can provide documentation of the specific instances you describe, the Rocky Mountain Tribune would be very interested in publishing a full expose. I urge you to act quickly. Men like Crane have destroyed evidence before when they sensed exposure. Yours in solidarity, James Watson. Lydia's hands shook. He believes us. He wants proof, real proof, documents. The bank records, Emma said. Mrs. Carter said she could get them. It's too dangerous now. After what Crane said publicly, he'll be watching everyone. Then we need another way. Lydia began pacing. John kept everything. Every piece of paper Crane ever sent us. Receipts, contracts, everything. You already showed me those. Not all of them. She stopped. When John got sick, he made me hide some things. Important things. He said if anything happened to him, I should only get them if I had nowhere else to turn. Where are they? At the farm. Hidden in the root cellar, under the floorboards. Daniel grabbed his coat. Let's go. It's 3 miles. Crane might have men watching. Then we go at night. Tonight. They rode out after midnight, leaving Emma in charge of the children. The moon was bright enough to navigate, but dim enough to hide in. The Watson farmhouse stood dark and silent. Abandoned, but not demolished. Crane wanted the land, not the buildings. Lydia led Daniel around back to the cellar doors. They creaked as she lifted them, and both froze listening. Nothing. They descended into blackness. Lydia struck a match and lit a candle she'd brought. The root cellar was small, lined with empty shelves that had once held preserved food. Over here. She knelt in the corner, prying up loose boards. John built this himself. Said a man should always have a place to hide what matters. Beneath the boards lay a metal box. Lydia lifted it out, her breath catching. I haven't opened this since he died. Do you want me to? No. She took a shaky breath. No, I need to do this. She opened the box. Inside were documents, dozens of them. Contracts, letters, receipts, and at the bottom a leather-bound journal. Lydia lifted it with trembling hands. This is John's handwriting. He kept a record. Names, dates, amounts. She flipped through pages. It's all here. Everything Crane did to us, and—" She stopped. "What is it?" Lydia looked up. Her face had gone white. "It's not just us." She held up the journal. John was collecting information from other families too. Before he died. He was building a case against Crane. He was going to— A sound above. Footsteps on wood. They both froze. "Someone's in the house," Daniel whispered. The cellar door flew open. Lamplight poured down. And standing at the top of the stairs, pistol drawn, was Silas Crane. "Well, well," he said softly. "What have we here?" Daniel stepped in front of Lydia, shielding her with his body. "Drop whatever you're holding," Crane said. "Slowly. It's just papers, old documents. Papers that belong to me now. The Watson farm is my property, which means everything in it is mine." Crane gestured with the pistol. "Up the stairs, both of you." They climbed into the farmhouse kitchen. Two of Crane's men waited, their rifles ready. The same hard-faced enforcers who'd delivered the warning days ago. "Search them," Crane ordered. Rough hands patted Daniel down, taking his knife. They found the journal tucked inside Lydia's coat. Crane took it, flipped through the pages. His face darkened with each turn. "John Watson was cleverer than I gave him credit for." He snapped the journal shut. "Fortunately, dead men don't testify." "You killed him." Lydia's voice shook with fury. "The fever. It wasn't natural, was it?" "Fevers happen, especially when someone's been drinking contaminated water for months." Crane shrugged. "Tragic, really. A strong man like that. But he refused to sell, and I'm not a patient person." Daniel lunged. He didn't think, didn't plan, just moved. 3 years of grief and rage channeling into his fists. He got one solid punch and felt Crane's nose crunch under his knuckles before the rifle butt slammed into his skull. The world went white, then black. He woke to pain. His head throbbed, his wrists burned. When he tried to move, he realized he was bound to a chair. Rope bit into his arms and ankles. "Daniel." Lydia's voice. Desperate. Close. He forced his eyes open. They were still in the farmhouse kitchen. Lydia was tied to another chair across from him, her face streaked with tears. Crane sat between them, dabbing blood from his broken nose with a silk handkerchief. The journal lay open on the table in front of him. "You have a strong right hand, Mr. Foster. I'll give you that." Crane's voice was thick nasal. "But strength without intelligence is just violence, and violence has consequences. Let her go. This is between us now. Is it I rather think Mrs. Watson is central to everything?" Crane turned to her. "Your husband was building quite the case against me. Names, dates, amounts. Testimony from a dozen families. He was going to destroy me." Lydia said nothing. Her jaw was set, her eyes burning with hatred. "But he made a mistake." Crane tapped the journal. "He told people, asked questions. Word got back to me before he could act." Another shrug. "The fever was convenient, easy to arrange, and his widow was supposed to be easy to break." "I'll never stop fighting you." "I know, that's the problem." Crane stood pacing slowly. "I've tried being reasonable, offered extensions, offered alternatives. But you're proud, Mrs. Watson, stubborn, just like your husband. Don't you dare speak about John." "Why not? I knew him better than you think. Watched him work himself half to death on this worthless land. Watched him refuse every offer I made, every chance to walk away with something. Pride, he called it. Principle." Crane laughed. "Where did pride get him into the ground? Where will it get you? Someplace better than where you're going." Crane's face tightened. For a moment the smooth mask slipped, revealing something ugly beneath. "You think you can threaten me? You're a widow with 7 children and nothing to your name. He's a wagon maker who works for free like a fool. Together you're nothing, less than nothing." "Then why are you afraid of us?" The question landed like a slap. Crane stepped closer to Lydia, looming over her. Afraid I'm not afraid. I'm annoyed. You've been stirring up trouble, gathering women for quilting bees that are really conspiracy meetings, sending letters to newspapers, convincing people they don't have to pay what they owe. They don't owe what you claim. Your books are cooked. Everyone knows it. Prove it. Crane smiled. Oh, wait. You can't. This journal is the only real evidence anyone's ever gathered against me. And now, I have it. He walked to the stove, opened the iron door. Flames crackled inside. No. Lydia struggled against her bonds. Don't. Years of my father's work. Years of testimony. Evidence that could have helped dozens of families. Crane held the journal over the flames. Gone in seconds. Like it never existed. He dropped it into the fire. Lydia screamed. Daniel pulled at his ropes until his wrists bled, but the journal caught, curled, blackened. Pages turned to ash. Crane watched it burn with satisfaction. Now then, let's discuss terms. Daniel's mind raced. The journal was gone, their best evidence destroyed. But Crane was talking instead of killing them, which meant he wanted something. What terms? Simple ones. Crane turned back to them. Mrs. Watson signs over the deed to her farm, officially, legally, in front of witnesses. I'd rather burn with that journal. Would you? Crane pulled a piece of paper from his coat. This is a list of your children's names. Thomas, Martha, Samuel, Elizabeth, Grace, William, Rose. He read each name slowly, deliberately. 7 children, 7 potential orphans. Are you really willing to risk their futures for a piece of land? Lydia's face went pale. Sign the deed, and I'll forgive your debt entirely. You can take your children and leave Cedar Bend. Start fresh somewhere else. I'll even give you $50 for traveling expenses. And if I refuse, then I'll destroy you both. Foster's workshop will burn. His house will burn. His daughter will find herself homeless. And you'll watch your children taken away, one by one, placed in institutions because their mother was declared unfit. Crane smiled. I have lawyers, Mrs. Watson. I have judges. I have men who'll swear to anything I tell them. Do you really want to test how much I can make you suffer? Daniel's voice cut through. She's not signing anything. I don't believe I was talking to you. You're talking to both of us now. Because whatever you do to her, you do to me. Crane raised an eyebrow. How touching. The noble wagon maker defending his widow. He looked between them. Is there something going on here I should know about? Something scandalous that would make things even easier. Go to hell. Eventually, no doubt. But not today. Crane checked his pocket watch. It's 3 in the morning. I'll give you until dawn to make your decision. Sign the deed and walk away free. Refuse and watch everything you love destroyed. He snapped his fingers. His men grabbed the chairs and dragged them to separate corners of the room. Think carefully, Crane said from the doorway. Some choices can't be unmade. Then he was gone, leaving 2 guards to watch them. The hours crawled. Daniel worked at his ropes in the darkness, but they were tied by men who knew their business. Every movement sent pain shooting through his wrists. Lydia. He kept his voice barely above a whisper. Can you hear me? Yes. Don't sign it. Whatever he threatens, don't sign. My children, Daniel. He'll hurt my children. Emma knows something's wrong by now. She's smart. She'll get help. From who the whole town is afraid of him. Not everyone. The women at your gathering. The families I talked to. They're angry, Lydia. They just need a reason to act. What reason can they possibly have now? The journal's gone. Our evidence burned. Daniel closed his eyes. She was right. Without the journal, they had nothing but accusations, word against word, and Crane's word carried the weight of money, power, and fear. But something nagged at him. Something Crane had said. He knew about the letters, Daniel said slowly. Knew about the quilting bee. Knew about everything we've been doing. He has spies everywhere. But he didn't know about the journal. Not until tonight. If he'd known, he would have taken it months ago. What are you saying? I'm saying John hid that evidence so well that even Crane couldn't find it. He only discovered it because we led him right to it. Lydia was quiet for a moment. Then, we should have been more careful. Maybe. Or maybe we needed to force his hand. Daniel's mind worked furiously. Think about it. Why is Crane here himself? Why not just send his men? Why offer you a deal instead of just taking what he wants? Because he's afraid of something. Exactly. The newspaper. The letter we sent. He knows that story could destroy him if it gets published. The journal would have been proof, but even without it, the investigation might dig up other evidence. Records he can't burn, witnesses he can't silence. So he needs me to sign the deed, to make everything look legitimate, to make it look like you chose to leave, like there was no wrongdoing, like he's just a businessman collecting what's owed. Daniel pulled harder at his ropes. If we can hold out long enough, hold out how we're tied up with guns pointed at us. I don't know yet, but I know giving in doesn't save us. It just lets him win clean. Silence. The guards shifted by the door, bored and half asleep. Daniel. Yeah. If we don't make it through this, Lydia's voice caught. I need you to know something. Don't talk like that. I need to say it, in case I don't get another chance. She drew a shaky breath. These past weeks, living in your house, watching you with my children, feeling like I might actually have a future worth living, that meant everything. Lydia, I love you. The words came out fierce, defiant. I know we haven't had time. I know there's no logic to it. But I love you, Daniel Foster. And whatever happens next, I needed you to know. Daniel's throat tightened. 3 years of grief. 3 years of numbness. And now tied to a chair in a dead man's farmhouse, he finally felt something break free inside him. I love you too. I think I have since the moment you climbed down from that wagon. Since you stood there with 7 children and nothing but courage, and looked at me like I was worth trusting. You were. You are. Then trust me now. We're going to get through this. And when we do, I'm going to marry you properly. In front of the whole town. With all 7 of your children standing witness. A sound from Lydia. Half sob, half laugh. Is that a proposal? It's a promise. Same thing where I come from. Before Lydia could respond, the door burst open. Not Crane's men. Thomas. He came through the doorway like a whirlwind, a hunting rifle in his hands that was almost too big for him to hold. Behind him came Emma carrying a pistol, and behind her, Sarah Patterson. Mrs. Henderson. A dozen women Daniel recognized from the gathering, armed with whatever they could find. Shotguns, pitchforks, kitchen knives, and at the back of the group, holding a rifle with the calm competence of a woman who'd used one before, stood Mrs. Carter, the banker's wife. Nobody move. Thomas's voice cracked, but his hands were steady. Drop your weapons. The guards hesitated. 2 men against a mob of angry women wasn't good odds. They dropped their rifles. Thomas. Lydia's voice was equal parts terror and relief. How did you... Emma knew something was wrong when you didn't come back. Thomas was already cutting her bonds. She woke the whole town. Not the whole town, Emma corrected, freeing Daniel. Just the people who matter. Mrs. Patterson stepped forward, her face grim. Crane made a mistake tonight. He thought we were too scared to fight back. He was wrong. Where is he? Daniel rubbed his bleeding wrists. Gone. Rode off when he heard us coming. But we've got his men. And we've got something else. Mrs. Carter held up a leather satchel. My husband's been keeping copies of Crane's real accounts, hidden in our root cellar for 3 years in case he ever needed leverage. When I told him what was happening tonight, he finally agreed to use them. Daniel stared at her. The bank records. The real ones. Every fraudulent transaction, every cooked book, every family Crane has cheated. Mrs. Carter's smile was sharp. That newspaper in Denver wanted evidence. Now they'll have more than they can print. The sun was rising by the time they returned to Cedar Bend. The town was awake and waiting. Word had spread fast the women's army, the confrontation at the Watson farm, Crane's flight into the darkness. People lined the main street watching as Daniel and Lydia walked past with their unlikely rescuers. Some faces were hostile. Crane had his loyalists. But more were curious, hopeful, waiting to see what happened next. Sheriff Morgan met them outside the jail. He was an old man, tired and worn down by years of looking the other way. Foster, Mrs. Watson. He eyed the crowd behind them. What's all this about? We're pressing charges, Daniel said, against Silas Crane, fraud, intimidation, conspiracy to commit murder. Murder? That's a serious accusation. John Watson didn't die of natural fever. Lydia's voice carried clearly. Crane poisoned our well. He admitted it himself not 3 hours ago. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. You have proof of this. Mrs. Carter stepped forward with the satchel. We have proof of everything. Bank records showing systematic fraud, contracts with forged signatures, payment schedules that were changed after the fact. She set the satchel on the ground at the sheriff's feet. Crane's been robbing this town for 10 years, Sheriff. The only question is whether you're going to do something about it. Morgan looked at the satchel, at the crowd, at the armed women who'd just faced down one of the most powerful men in the territory. Crane's got lawyers, he said slowly. Judges in his pocket. Even if this evidence is real, bringing him to trial. Then don't try him here. Daniel pulled the letter from his coat. The response from James Watson in Denver. The Rocky Mountain Tribune is already investigating. Federal marshals have jurisdiction over banking fraud. This doesn't have to be Cedar Bend's fight alone. You'd bring outsiders into this? I'd do whatever it takes to protect my family. Daniel's voice hardened. Crane threatened to burn my home. Threatened to take Lydia's children. He's been terrorizing good people for years, and everyone's been too scared to stop him. That ends today. The sheriff was quiet for a long moment. Then slowly, he bent and picked up the satchel. I'll need statements. From everyone. You'll have them. And Crane will fight this. He'll hire every lawyer in the territory. He'll call in every favor. Let him. Sarah Patterson stepped forward. We're done being afraid. Done watching our neighbors destroyed while we pretend nothing's happening. If Crane wants a war, he's got one. A cheer went up from the crowd. Not everyone, some faces remained closed, uncertain, loyal to the old order. But enough. Enough to matter. Daniel felt Lydia's hand slip into his. Her fingers were cold, trembling slightly. It's not over, she said quietly. No, but it started. They spent the next week giving statements, gathering evidence, preparing for the fight ahead. The letter to Denver went out with a copy of the bank records. 3 days later, a telegram arrived. The Tribune was sending a reporter. Federal marshals were being notified. The story was about to become bigger than Cedar Bend could contain. Crane didn't run. That surprised Daniel. Instead, he hired more lawyers, made more threats, called in every debt he was owed, trying to turn the town against the people who'd exposed him. It didn't work. The women's gathering had broken something: the isolation, the fear, the belief that resistance was impossible. Families who'd suffered in silence for years finally had allies, finally had hope. Mrs. Henderson, of all people, became one of their fiercest advocates. She stood in front of the general store and told everyone who passed about how Crane had threatened her husband, how she'd been too scared to speak until she saw other women doing it first. I judged you wrongly, she told Lydia one afternoon. You and Daniel both. I thought you were shameless living together unwed. I didn't see that you were just surviving. We all do what we have to. Yes, we do. Henderson's eyes were bright. My grandmother came west in a wagon train, lost her husband to cholera on the trail. She raised 6 children alone working fields that would have broken most men. I'd forgotten what that kind of strength looked like. She took Lydia's hands. I won't forget again. The reporter arrived 2 weeks later. A young man named Hayes with sharp eyes and a notebook that never left his hand. He interviewed everyone Daniel Lydia, the women who'd stormed the Watson farm the family's Crane had victimized. This is bigger than I expected, Hayes told Daniel one evening. Crane's not just operating here. He's got connections to a network of bankers across 3 territories. Same patterns everywhere. Fraudulent loans, manipulated records, land grabs disguised as foreclosures. Can you prove it? With what you've given me, I can prove enough to start a federal investigation. Hayes smiled grimly. Men like Crane think they're untouchable because they're rich. They forget that newspapers don't care about rich. Newspapers care about scandal. The story ran on a Sunday. Daniel stood in his workshop with Lydia and Emma reading the Tribune's front page aloud. The headline was everything they'd hoped for. Banking empire built on fraud, territorial scandal exposed. It's really happening, Emma whispered. Not yet. Daniel set the paper down. Crane's still free, still dangerous. He won't go down without a fight. Neither will we. Lydia's hand found his. Her grip was strong, certain. The fear that had haunted her eyes for so long was still there, but it was smaller now. Crowded out by something else, hope and love, and the fierce determination of a woman who'd finally found something worth fighting for. Whatever comes next, she said, we face it together. Together, Daniel agreed. Outside, the children played in the autumn sunshine. Thomas and Samuel were building something in the workshop corner. Martha and Emma were teaching Rose to read. The little ones chased each other through piles of fallen leaves. The sound of their laughter filled the air. 7 children who'd lost their father. 1 girl who'd lost her mother. All of them finding something new in the wreckage of what they'd lost. Family. Hope. A future worth believing in. Daniel watched them for a long moment. Then he turned to Lydia and said the words he'd been holding for weeks. Marry me. She smiled. Not surprised, not hesitant. I thought you'd never ask properly. Is that a yes? That's a yes, Daniel Foster. 1,000 times yes. He kissed her, right there in the workshop doorway, with children watching, and Emma cheering, and the whole impossible future stretching out before them. Behind them, the broken wagon still sat in its corner. Repaired now, whole. Ready to carry a family forward instead of apart. Some things were meant to break, Daniel realized. Some things needed breaking before they could be built again. He'd been broken for 3 years. Lydia had been broken for 8 months. Their children had been broken in ways only time could heal. But together, they were becoming something new, something stronger than any of them had been alone. The lamp in the workshop window would burn again tonight. But now it meant something different. It meant home. It meant family. It meant the beginning of everything that came next. The federal marshals arrived on a Tuesday morning 3 weeks after the Tribune story broke. Daniel watched from his workshop as 2 men in long coats rode into Cedar Bend. Their badges caught the autumn sunlight. Their faces held the grim determination of men who'd come to do unpleasant work. Mr. Foster. The lead marshal dismounted. I'm Marshal William Garrett. This is Deputy Marshal Cole. We're looking for Silas Crane. His house is on the hill, east side of town. We know where it is. We also know he hasn't been there in 3 days. Garrett's eyes were sharp, assessing. Word is, you might know where he's gone. I don't, but I wish I did. Lydia appeared at Daniel's side. She'd been expecting this visit, preparing for it. Her back was straight, her voice steady. Crane threatened my children, Marshal, admitted to poisoning my husband. If I knew where he was hiding, I'd tell you myself. Garrett studied her for a long moment. Then he nodded. We've read your statements. All of them. The evidence Mrs. Carter provided is—" He paused, searching for the right word. "Comprehensive. Comprehensive enough to arrest him. Comprehensive enough to convict him, if we can find him." The news spread through Cedar Bend like fire through dry grass. Crane was running. The most powerful man in the territory, the one everyone had feared for so long, was hiding like a common criminal. But running men could still be dangerous. That night, Daniel woke to the smell of smoke. He was on his feet before his mind fully registered what was happening. The orange glow outside his window told him everything he needed to know. "Fire! Everyone up now!" The barn was already engulfed. Flames climbed the walls, reaching for the roof where Lydia and her children had once sheltered. The hay inside crackled and roared. "The children!" Lydia screamed from the doorway. "Where are the children?" "Inside. They're inside with Emma." But Thomas was already running toward the barn, toward the horses trapped inside. "Thomas, no!" Daniel caught him 3 steps from the door. The boy struggled, tears streaming down his face. "The horse is Papa's saddle. Everything we have left. It's just things, son. Things can be replaced. You can't." The roof collapsed with a roar. Sparks shot into the sky like angry stars. Thomas went limp in Daniel's arms, sobbing against his chest. By the time the neighbors arrived with buckets, there was nothing left to save. They stood in a semicircle, watching the embers die. Lydia held Rose in her arms. Emma had the younger children clustered around her. The older ones stood apart, their faces lit by the dying flames. Sheriff Morgan pushed through the crowd. "Anyone hurt?" "No." Daniel's voice was hoarse from smoke. "We got everyone out. You see who did this. Didn't need to see. We all know who did this." Morgan's jaw tightened. "I can't arrest a man based on assumptions." "Then stop assuming and start looking." Daniel stepped toward him. "Crane's been gone 3 days. His men are still here. Someone gave the order. Someone lit the match." "Daniel, my family was in that barn 2 weeks ago, Sheriff. If we hadn't moved them into the house—" His voice broke. 7 children. 7. Lydia's hand found his arm, steadying him, anchoring him. "We'll find who did this," Morgan said quietly. "I give you my word." "Your word hasn't meant much for 10 years. The sheriff flinched, but he didn't argue. They both knew it was true. The crowd dispersed slowly. Neighbors offered help, shelter, food. The same neighbors who'd whispered about Lydia just weeks ago now opened their homes without hesitation. Mrs. Henderson was the first. "My house has room," she said. "Not much, but enough. The children can stay as long as they need." "Mrs. Henderson," Lydia started. "Please, let me do this. After everything I said, everything I thought." Her voice trembled. "Let me make it right." Dawn found Daniel still standing where the barn had been. The ashes smoldered. The smell of smoke hung thick in the air. Everything Lydia's family had owned, the few possessions they'd salvaged, the memories they'd tried to preserve, was gone. "You should sleep." Emma appeared beside him, wrapped in a borrowed shawl. "You've been up all night." "Can't sleep. Keep thinking about what would have happened if they'd torched the house instead." "They didn't. This time." Emma was quiet for a moment. Then she said something that made Daniel turn and stare. "Mama would have loved her." "What?" "Lydia. Mama would have loved her." Emma's eyes were bright with tears. "She would have seen the same thing you see. The strength, the love, the way she'd do anything for her children." "Emma, I was scared at first. When they came to stay, I thought it meant you were forgetting Mama, replacing her." She wiped her cheeks. "But that's not what this is it? It's not replacing. It's adding." Daniel pulled his daughter into his arms. She was 15, but felt smaller, younger, like the girl she'd been before grief had made her grow up too fast. "I'll never forget your Mama. Never." "I know." But she'd want you to be happy, Papa. She'd want both of us to be happy. Are you happy? Emma pulled back and smiled. Margaret's smile, the one that had captured his heart at a Sunday social decades ago. I have 7 brothers and sisters now. I have someone who teaches me to cook and braid hair and tells me stories about the places she wants to go someday. Her smile widened. Yeah, Papa. I'm happy. The marshals found Crane's trail 2 days later. He'd fled west toward the mountains. A rancher reported seeing a man matching his description buying supplies at a trading post. Another said he'd passed through headed for the high country. He's running for California, Marshal Garrett told Daniel. Thinks he can disappear in San Francisco. Lose himself in a city big enough to swallow a man whole. Will you catch him? We'll catch him. Men like Crane always make mistakes. They're too arrogant to believe anyone can touch them. Garrett paused. But it might take time. Months, maybe. Can your people hold together that long? Daniel looked across the yard, where the children played. Thomas was teaching Samuel to whittle. Martha was helping Emma hang laundry. Rose sat in Lydia's lap listening to a story. We'll hold. Good, because when we bring Crane back there's going to be a trial. A real one in federal court. We'll need witnesses, people willing to stand up and tell the truth no matter how hard Crane's lawyers push. You'll have them. Every family he's wronged, every person he's threatened, they'll all testify. Even knowing he might get off, even knowing his money might still buy his freedom, Daniel's jaw tightened. Justice isn't about guarantees, Marshal. It's about standing up anyway. It's about saying this is wrong and refusing to be silent. Garrett nodded slowly. Mrs. Watson's lucky to have you. I'm the lucky one. The weeks that followed were hard but full. Daniel rebuilt the barn with help from neighbors who'd finally found their courage. The Watson children worked alongside local families, forming bonds that would last lifetimes. Lydia organized the women of Cedar Bend into a formal association dedicated to supporting families in need. No more widows begging alone, she told Daniel one evening. No more children going hungry because their mothers are too proud to ask for help. We take care of each other now. Your husband would be proud. Lydia's eyes glistened. I think about him every day, about what he sacrificed trying to protect us, about the evidence he gathered that Crane destroyed. It wasn't for nothing. His work started this. Everything that's happening now, the investigation, the trial, the whole town finally standing together, it started with John Watson refusing to be silent. And it continues with you. Lydia took his hand. With us. The wedding happened on the first day of November. It wasn't fancy. They couldn't afford fancy, and neither of them wanted it. Just a simple ceremony in the church where Margaret was buried with the whole town gathered to witness. Lydia wore a dress that Mrs. Henderson had altered from her own wedding gown. Daniel wore his cleanest shirt and the look of a man who'd finally stopped running from happiness. Pastor Williams read the vows, traditional words spoken by generations of couples before them. But when he asked if anyone objected, a voice rang out from the back of the church. I object. Everyone turned. A woman stood in the doorway. Middle-aged, well-dressed, with sharp features and sharper eyes. Behind her stood a man in a lawyer's suit carrying a leather briefcase. Who are you? Pastor Williams asked. My name is Catherine Crane. Silas is my brother. She walked down the aisle, her heels clicking against the wooden floor. And I'm here to stop this farce. Daniel stepped in front of Lydia. Whatever you want, you won't get it here. What I want is justice, Mr. Foster. My brother is being hunted like an animal based on lies and fabricated evidence. This woman, she pointed at Lydia, conspired with you to destroy him. Your brother destroyed himself. His crimes are documented. By whom? A jealous widow and a lovesick wagon maker. Catherine's laugh was bitter. The courts will see through this charade, and when they do, everyone involved will pay. Is that a threat? It's a promise. My family has resources you can't imagine. We will drag this case through every court in the territory. We will destroy the reputation of everyone who testified against Silas. And we will make sure this marriage is declared invalid on grounds of fraud." The church erupted. Voices rose in anger, in fear, in defiance. Thomas pushed forward, fists clenched. Emma grabbed his arm to hold him back. Sheriff Morgan stepped between Catherine and the crowd. "Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to leave." "On what grounds?" "On the grounds that you're disrupting a legal ceremony, and on the grounds that threatening witnesses in a federal case is a crime." Catherine's face went red. "You can't." "I can, and I will." Morgan's voice hardened. "Your brother terrorized this town for 10 years. He killed a good man and tried to destroy his family. Whatever happens in court, these people are done being afraid of the Crane name. You'll regret this, all of you. Maybe, but we'll regret it together." Catherine stared at the sea of faces, hostile, determined, unafraid. For a moment, something flickered in her eyes. Not fear exactly, but the recognition of someone who'd miscalculated badly. She turned and walked out without another word. The lawyer followed, clutching his briefcase like a shield. The church was silent. Then Mrs. Patterson started clapping. One person, then another, then the whole congregation. Applause and cheers and relief that another battle had been won. Pastor Williams cleared his throat. "Well then, where were we? I believe," Lydia said, her voice steady despite the tears on her cheeks, "you were about to pronounce us man and wife." The pastor smiled. "So I was." Daniel kissed her while the town cheered. 7 children rushed forward to embrace them. Emma was crying. Thomas was laughing. Rose had her arms wrapped around both their legs, refusing to let go. It wasn't the wedding Daniel had imagined. It was better. Because it was real. Earned through fire and loss, and the slow, painful work of rebuilding broken things into something new. They walked out of the church into November sunshine, husband and wife, surrounded by the family they'd chosen. Catherine Crane's threat hung in the air. The trial was still to come. Silas was still running. Nothing was truly resolved. But they'd face it together, all of them. The 9 members of the Foster family, and the town that had finally learned to stand with them. Winter came hard and fast. By December, snow lay thick on the ground. The new barn was finished sturdy and warm. The house bulged at the seams with children, but no one complained. News arrived from Denver in January. Silas Crane had been captured trying to board a ship in San Francisco. He was being transported back to Wyoming territory to stand trial. "It's really happening," Lydia said when Daniel read her the letter. "After everything, it's really happening. Are you ready? To testify against the man who killed my husband and tried to destroy my family?" Her smile was fierce. "I've been ready for 2 years." The trial lasted 3 weeks. Daniel sat in the courtroom every day watching as witness after witness told their stories. Sarah Patterson described losing her farm. Mrs. Henderson recounted years of threats and intimidation. Mrs. Carter's husband explained the falsified records in damning detail. And Lydia told the truth about John Watson. She spoke for 2 hours. About his dreams for their family. About his refusal to sell land that had been in his family for generations. About the poisoned well and the mysterious fever and the deathbed promise she'd made to keep fighting. Crane's lawyers tried to discredit her. Called her a liar, a schemer, a woman who'd seduced Daniel Foster to gain his protection. The jury didn't believe them. The verdict came on a March morning. Guilty on all counts. Fraud, embezzlement, conspiracy. And at the end, the charge that mattered most, murder in the 2nd degree. Silas Crane would spend the rest of his life in federal prison. Daniel held Lydia as she wept, not from sadness, but from the overwhelming relief of finally being free. Around them, the townspeople who'd filled the courtroom embraced each other, their long nightmare finally over. "We did it," Lydia whispered. "John, we did it. He knows. Wherever he is, he knows." They walked out into the spring sunshine, their children surrounding them. Thomas stood taller than he had a year ago. Martha held Rose's hand with the easy confidence of a big sister. Emma had Samuel and Elizabeth and William trailing behind her like ducklings. 9 people, 1 family, forged from loss and strengthened by love. "What now?" Thomas asked. Daniel looked at Lydia. She looked back at him. "Now," Daniel said, "we go home." Spring turned the world green again. The Watson farm, their farm now bloomed under careful tending. Thomas took charge of the fields with a natural authority that made Daniel proud. The younger children had chores and schooling, and the simple, precious normalcy they'd been denied for so long. On a May morning, Daniel found Lydia standing at John Watson's grave. He'd been buried on a hill overlooking the farmhouse, where he could watch over his family even in death. "I told him about the trial," Lydia said without turning. "About the verdict, about Thomas learning to run the farm." "What else did you tell him?" "That I'm happy, that his children are safe, that the man who killed him will never hurt anyone again." She turned to face Daniel. "And that I love you, that loving you doesn't mean I stopped loving him." "I know." "Do you really?" Daniel stepped closer, took her hands in his. "Margaret's been gone 4 years now. I talk to her sometimes in my head, tell her about the children, about you, about how I never expected to feel this way again." "What does she say?" "She says it's about time I stopped being a stubborn fool." He smiled. "She says you're exactly what I needed." Lydia laughed a real laugh, free and unguarded. "I think I would have liked your Margaret." "She would have loved you." They stood together on the hill, looking down at the farm that had cost so much and given so much back. Below them, children's laughter drifted up. Emma's voice called them to breakfast. "Daniel. Thank you. For everything. For taking in a widow with 7 children and nothing to offer. For fighting when you didn't have to. For loving me when you had every reason to keep your heart closed. You don't have to thank me for that." "I know, but I want to." She squeezed his hands. "I want you to know that every day I wake up grateful. That this life we've built, this family we've become, it's more than I ever dreamed possible. It's more than either of us dreamed." "Is that enough? For you?" Daniel pulled her close. Held her the way he'd wanted to hold someone for 4 long years. "It's everything." The lamp in Daniel Foster's workshop still burned before dawn, but now there were footsteps behind him. Thomas arriving for morning lessons in woodworking. Samuel asking endless questions about grain patterns and joint strength. Even little William sometimes appeared too young to be useful, but too curious to stay away. The vow Daniel had made at Margaret's graveside had been kept. He'd helped every widow who came to him, charged nothing for his work, made sure no woman in Cedar Bend faced what Margaret had faced. But he'd learned something in the keeping of that vow. Something Margaret had tried to tell him, and he'd been too broken to hear. Charity wasn't enough. Duty wasn't enough. Even honor wasn't enough. What mattered was love. Love that took risks. Love that welcomed strangers. Love that built families from broken pieces and made something stronger than the original. Daniel had buried his wife in borrowed clothes because the world was cruel and indifferent. But the world could also be kind, could offer second chances to people brave enough to take them. Lydia had been brave. She'd driven her broken wagon into his yard with 7 hungry children and nothing but courage. She'd let herself love again when loving meant risking everything. And Daniel had finally been brave enough to love her back. The workshop door opened. Lydia appeared with a cup of coffee steam rising in the early morning chill. "The children are asking when breakfast will be ready." "Tell them soon." "I told them now. They're waiting for you." Daniel set down his tools, took the coffee, took her hand. "I never said thank you," he said quietly, "for fixing my broken heart." Lydia smiled, the same smile that had captured him in a year of darkness and shown him there was light again. "You fixed my broken wagon. I'd say we're even." They walked to the house together. 9 places were set at the table. 9 voices would fill the kitchen with chaos and laughter, and the ordinary miracle of family. Some things were meant to break, Daniel had learned. Some hearts needed breaking before they could love again. Some families needed scattering before they could find each other. But when broken things found their way together, when shattered pieces fit into new patterns, when love proved stronger than loss, that was when miracles happened. Daniel Foster opened the kitchen door and stepped into the warmth of home. Behind him, the workshop lamp still burned. But now it was a beacon, not a memorial. A promise kept and a new one just beginning. The widow and the wagon maker had found each other in the wreckage of their grief, and together they had built something that would last forever.